Greetings, students. Welcome to History 111, and this is the history of the ancient world. And we, unfortunately, due to this COVID crisis, will be tackling this ancient history curriculum through online medium. So I normally would be here to welcome you and greet you, but alas, we must do this within our virtual format this year. And we will get through this and it will be just fine. And I just want to welcome you to this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this video going over what you will do, when you will do it, how you will do it, but I just want to introduce you to the topic of the ancient world and just talk a little bit about what is history. So first of all, I am Dr. David Hill, and I am your professor for this class that we will be working through the curricula of the ancient world for the next 8 weeks together. And I hope that this will be enlightening, that it will be fun, that you will learn a lot, and that you will ultimately you will come to enjoy this class that you will have this semester. And I'm a professional historian, among other things, and I have traveled all over Europe. I attended the University of London at Imperial College. I went to Oxford for a short time. I've taught at the University of Cambridge in England through an exchange program with the University of Kansas, where I earned my PhD in medieval and Renaissance history. I am a native son of the Missouri area, and I have lived here most of my life and began teaching at Park University just a couple years ago. And I'm an avid lover of classics and history, and I really enjoy teaching these classes. And I hope that you will come to have an appreciation for them as I myself do. So if you want to follow along through the PowerPoints, please feel free to do so while these lectures play. And they won't be very long, but nearly as long as you would normally be subjected to if we were in person. But let's get started on the ancient world. So, what the ancient world is a land that is totally and radically different than what we might have come to know and understand in our own time. That this is a place that you don't have any cell phones, that you don't have antibiotics, you don't have scientific understanding of things. So this is a world that is radically different than what than we live in. So this will be a time that you really have to use your imagination, that you really have to put yourself in the shoes of those people who lived in these ancient worlds, and try to explore why they thought the way they thought and why they did things the way they did. And it can be very interesting looking at ancient philosophy. It can be very exciting following the conquests of Alexander and some of the ancient heroes. We're going to look at all kinds of different aspects of ancient society. Of course, we will follow somewhat of a political narrative over a long timeline. We will explore ancient religions and mythology. We will look at the Book of the Dead in Egypt. We will look at pyramids that were built all over the world. Why human beings built these great and colossal structures, and we will examine why they were doing things. Why did change occur? And we will move all the way from the time of the Stone Age to the first human beings, where basically a guy walks out of a cave, to the time of the Roman Empire. And we will conclude the course with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. And through that time, it will be over thousands and thousands of years, millennia, that we will look at. So we obviously are going to skip over some things, and we will cover things in much greater detail than others. So I'm sorry if you're going to miss out on something, but there are lots of supplemental readings and videos and things that you can explore whatever topic really interests you the most. So anytime you take a history class, you would have to ask yourself, why do I have to take a history class? And I think history is a very important subject because it teaches you a lot of things. And this is where I would normally ask you, well, what is history? And why are you being forced to take this class at this university? And I really think that history can basically be boiled down into four approaches when I ask what is history. And first of all, it can be described as facts, where it's just one thing after another. Um, you can do history this way. It's not that exciting. Probably anyone who's taken a high school history class is very familiar with just one damn thing after another approach. Um, so, secondly, there is a study of causes and ends. And this is we ask ourselves and examine why things happened the way they did. So we try to study causes and ends. Why did World War II happen? Why did the Roman Empire fall? So that is the interpretive science of history, is looking at why something happened. And really, number three, I think, is it plays into this same question. It's history can be thought of as an interpretive social science. So you are asking yourself not only why something happened, but you are really getting into the nitty gritty of learning to read and write and think critically. That it requires great erudition and great skill in order to work through the facts of the past and try to determine the causes and ends of something. So history is very much an interpretive social science. And finally, it can be not only a social science, but it's also an art. There's something beautiful about telling the story of humankind. This is an art, it's a philosophy, and you are giving certain things preference when you interpret history. Always, you have to make decisions. You can't do everything. You can't explain everything. So you are giving some things preference. But history is very good about also inspiring someone. It can explain things, but it can also inspire you. And I think this is the great and awesome power within history. For instance, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II, famously, when he was trying to make up his mind whether he was going to appease Adolf Hitler or whether he was going to dig in and fight, he takes out his copy of Plutarch and he reads. He reads this story of Horatius Cocles, who you will come to know through this curricula. But Horatius was a Roman soldier who was captain of a gate of Rome, and the Etruscan army was getting ready to push into the city of Rome, and basically everyone abandons their post, and Horatius stands alone on the bridge, and he faces down the entire Etruscan army, and through his courage, he inspires all the Roman army to rally and basically single-handedly saves the city of Rome. And Churchill cites this story as something that gave him the courage when everyone else wanted him to appease Hitler, to stand his ground and do what he knew was right. So I think, along with history being something that is about explaining, about facts, it's also, there is something beautiful, and it's also could be considered very much an art and a tool that can make us better people, that we can be inspired through the deeds of our predecessors. So always keep that in mind, that history is more than just this sort of boring one thing after another, memorizing what was the Wilmot Proviso and things like this. But history can be something that is a living entity that can be very inspiring. And well, how do we do history at the professional level, at the college level, whatever we want to call it? Well, we, of course, have to write history. We have to have a thesis, an argument of how we are interpreting something or what history means to us. And we do this by looking at primary sources. And primary sources are anything that comes out of a time period that is contemporaneous with the time period that you are examining. So, for instance, if you are studying the Roman Empire under Augustus, anything that was produced during that time period is a primary source for the Emperor Augustus. Anything that comes, say, 100, 200 years after that will no longer be considered a primary source, right? It has to have happened. It has to be primary evidence for the civilization, the person, the event that you are studying. And not only can it be written evidence, but it can also be art or it can be archaeology, material, culture of the society that you are understanding. And within this spectrum of primary evidence, there is always certain privilege that you give certain evidence over other evidence. Anything written by a human being is going to have a bias. They are going to have an axe to grind in what they want you to think. An administrative document, archaeology, it's not going to have this same kind of bias. So we obviously give some privilege for things that we can be very certain about, and some things that we have to approach with a degree of skepticism. So that is primary evidence. That is the main tool of the historian. That all things that we write about have to be founded upon primary evidence. So then we also have secondary sources or secondary evidence. So that can be anything written after the time period. So again, if we use Augustus, the Roman emperor's time period, if I write something about the Emperor Augustus, that is a secondary source. If someone 500 years after Augustus writes a biography of Augustus, his account or her account might be better than my own, but it is not something that is primary, that is contemporaneous with the source. So that is how historians do the work. So anything produced after the time period is considered to be a secondary source. So historiography. The history of history, how we have done and interpreted history over several hundred years, as history is really a discipline that is born in the 1860s, 70s in Europe, and it studied great men and something we call the grand narrative. And it really doesn't care anything about the not so rich and famous. It only really cares about politics and statesmen, and how politics, diplomacy, and great people lived. And this is all before World War I. Really, World War I brings us, and it really, at the advent of industrialization in the early 1900s, a few people began to look at history from a different light, meaning that they said, these great men got us into World War I, they got us into World War II, and why should we bother always studying them? That other people, the people who do the vast majority of the working, living, and dying in society are valuable and meritorious, and that we should study them. So this is called history from below, or social history. So it's a different way of looking at something. Again, as I stress to you, you're always going to be giving something privileged within your history. You can't look at 100% of everything. So these are different schools of thought of how historians have interpreted why events happen and what matters most in history. Then beginning following World War II and really in the 1960s, we see the advent of women's history, where women had not been considered a topic of deep study within history, that a new school of thought said we have to write women back into this narrative. So it is an intense focus upon women within all societies and times and places. Shortly after that, there was something that is called the Anthropological Turn, or that historians, in order to try and understand something like ancient history, you have to radically change how you think. Ancient peoples did not think like we think. So the best way historians of the 1970s and 80s thought to examine primitive cultures, or to understand ancient history, was to examine primitive cultures of our own time. So they might go into the rainforests of the Amazon or the subtropical regions of Africa, and they would observe. Anthropologists would observe this, and they would write studies. And so historians could read these studies and get an understanding into the primitive mind, as they would have said. So that was another school of thought, a lens of looking at how you could interpret ancient societies. And finally, we come to a time of postmodernism, meaning this is another school of thought is that you can't trust really anything you read, because you can't understand the context, or you can't understand what that person meant within a particular context, as language changes so much and constantly evolves. For instance, if any of you have ever driven a car and you came to a red hexagon sign with the word stop written right in the middle of it, you should still be sitting there if you interpreted that literally. Because stop means to halt, to cease motion. It does not mean pause. And that is what you are intended to do at a stop sign. So postmodernists would say it requires an intensive study of historical context to understand what is meant by something. So if someone in 2,000 years saw a stop sign, they would interpret that to mean halt based upon our language. But in reality, it doesn't mean to halt, it means to pause. So, therefore, the postmodernists encourage us to be highly skeptical and work intensely to understand the linguistic context. So that is a bit of historiography, and I hope that you have come to understand kind of where we will be going in this course, and why we are doing this history, and that history is more than just simply the facts and one thing after another, but it's a way of examining the world we live in that can be revolutionary, right? We can find new ways of understanding history and writing new things about events that have happened thousands and thousands of years ago that can be inspirational to us in this world. So I look forward to the remainder of our course, and I hope you're excited to be here, and there will be more on the nitty-gritty of what is going on in the coming videos. But in the meantime, I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the syllabus and our curriculum, what we'll be going over, and to enjoy yourself. Really get into these readings and to examine this. Learning is not just about getting A's, but it's about understanding this world you live in and where you came out of, and it can be a great thing. So I would encourage you to take this time and to really dive in and study and learn from some of these things, these texts and videos and such. So anyway, I will see you at our next meeting. Take care.